Gentlemen, we're just about ready to start the big show. Fred, what are you doing? I haven't seen you in a month of Fridays.
How are you?
or any of those days.
Tuesday or
I'm
Wednesday
doing
either.
well. Good to see
Tuesday or
you.
Wednesday either. Where have you been?
I've been. All right. Whoa. I'm not allowed to do that, right? How do I get rid of that? Oh. What you doing, buddy?
Oh, hanging in there.
So, how's Ray? All righty. Ladies, gentlemen, Sarah, and friends, good evening. Wait a minute, one thing. If I get out of control, you guys are the referees. I just want I just want the world to know that I am tethered. Okay, and what do you think of the new splash screen, huh? Anybody? All right, there we go. This is October 19th, right? Okay, good. All right, welcome, Sarah and friends, the best looking hams in the hobby. And if you don't believe me, just look around. Look around, yeah. Beauty abounds.
Some of the best looking retirees also.
Oh, no. Don't go there. Don't go there. But that table over there, yeah. And there's a table over here, yeah. And let's see. There's a table back there, yeah. Yeah, we got some female XYL, YL stuff going on here, and that is a good thing. All right, anyway. Anybody here that hasn't been here before, or ma'am, if you would.
I'm Donna Stein. I'm a ham with
Steve's wife?
Yes, I
Okay,
am.
okay.
All right, that puts it in.
I'm here because I'm wondering about help for Greece Across America.
Okay. All right, we will have an opportunity for you to address the group with that. No worries whatsoever. Anybody else? Yes, sir.
My name's Doug Strayed. New call sign is KE8ZHG.
K.
KE8ZHG.
Okay.
I took the test a couple weeks ago. First time I-
All right, well, thank you for being here. Are you 17 years? How many? Oh, man, I'm telling you. Well, that's an impeachable offense. I just want everybody to know that.
You can't get out of that.
I keep trying. Okay, anybody else new or first time here? Or want to reassociate yourself? Okay, I'm Gary Shorter, AAHCS, and sometimes I'm the president of this club. All right, we're going to move right along here. You know what? I got to tell you, this has been the roughest time that I can remember. I mean, literally in the last, 4 weeks, we lost Bob Bone. We lost Lenny Round, N8XLQ, and most recently, Zeke, AB8OU. Zeke was at a luncheon 2 weeks ago that I attend a lot. And he was fine, and he died that day. I got an email from Mel Vi. Some of you know him. Mel said he was across the table from me, and now he's not here. Anyway, Zeke was my vice president way back in, I don't know, 11 through 14 maybe, something like that. And he never let me forget it. Yeah. Anyway, I just wanted to just take a moment and remember these guys. Bob's been a longtime member. Zeke, longtime member. And Lenny, short-time member, but someone I really, really wanted to meet. And I think I even mentioned to you that one of the reasons for the luncheon coming up on Saturday the 21st is Lenny. I wanted to meet this guy. He was really incredible on the radio. Fabulous sense of humor, and I never got to meet him. And for that, I am saddened more than anything. But does anybody have anything they would like to say about any of these guys, or Dave?
I got to know Bob.
Sorry.
I got to know Bob maybe 10 years ago, and he really welcomed me back into the ham radio hobby, and we shared food together. He would go down to Cincinnati and buy Geta and bring back a couple of extra tubes of Geta for me, and I've still got a tube in the freezer that I'm going to eat in memory of Bob. Lenny was a bass player, so am I. That was our connection. I was hoping to maybe jam with Lenny at some point. And I remember Zeke as being a person who would absolutely not answer a trivia question. These are wonderful people. I'm just sad that we're losing folks in our group, but I'm happy that we are gaining members in our group at actually a greater number than we're losing them. So I think this club is in a good position right now. I did a couple of fox hunts with Bob. He has a really nice setup that's all just like a go box. If I would do it myself, if anybody wants to join me, I would like to do a memorial fox hunt, at least annually. in memory of Bob and make that part of what we do as a club. We can do it more often as we want. You know, between the Memorial Award and the Broadernet plaque and all these other things, I think remembering the people who are part of this community, I think is becoming a part of the mission of this community. And I think we should kind of just think about that going forward. Is how would we want to memorialize our folks? I miss Jim, SGP. You know, I'm going to miss Zeke. I'm going to miss Bob. And we can't make an award for everybody. But I think we can do a really good job at keeping our community together as a community and just make a history for us moving forward. And these three folks, I think, are a good part of that history. And I guess I'll just leave it there.
Absolutely. Okay. Fred?
Perhaps we could make the fox hunt a memorial fox hunt and add to this group of fine gentlemen, amateur operators, and just continue on. And you're not going to hit me, are you?
I'm thinking about it.
No, actually, I thought maybe we could just make it a memorial fox hunt for those silent keys who've come about, and it's important that we recognize our membership and these amateur radar operators that have immense amounts of knowledge, and I just think it'd be great to have a memorial fox hunt for silent keys. 7-3.
Interesting. Yeah, no, that's, you know, fox hunting has never been our strong suit, but we have done a number of them in the past, and we used to do a lot more, and I think that's a good idea. And if we want to do that, then we'll step up and do it. So that's something that we can take up next spring. Okay, anybody else? I will say, I will miss these guys. Bob and Zeke. He used to complain. He said, you know, you're always on vacation, and I got to take over. I said, well, that's your job. Anyway, you gotta love Zeke. Anyway, all right, let's move right along. We did talk about Bob last month, if you guys recall. That was the Bob Bone Memorial meeting, actually. So, all right, next up we have some announcements. The Massillon Ham Fest is coming up at the Maps Museum. If you haven't been to the Maps Museum, go ahead and take in the Ham Fest. Take in the Ham Fest and then enjoy the Maps Museum. It is fabulous.
Buy a ticket for cheaper than you can get in here.
Yeah, it's $5. $5, and it's a fabulous. Massillon Club does a great job with Hamfest. I just got to tell you, they did it during COVID, and I've talked about this a couple times, and it was phenomenally orchestrated. They do a nice job. Anyway, that's coming up. And let's see, the Great Lakes Division Director election. I just want to make sure, if you have not voted, please vote. If you have not voted, please vote. If you do not have the email or the letter that was sent out, there's a phone number on the screen, 866-720-4357. That goes to the this group here. The ARRL has hired an outboard service to take care of this election. So email or phone, but vote. Any questions on that? Yes, sir.
I just want to make a comment. I got an
Sure.
email from them, and the email looked very fishy to me.
Really?
And so I decided to just delete it because it looked like it was phishing. And then after I did that, I emailed Scott Yonley, and I just said, hey, do you know if this was real or not? And he said, yeah, that's real. So I was like, oh, so then I was like, hey, I was gonna vote for you, so I pulled it back up and then voted for him. But, the links, like, the way they did the links, the text of the link that was in the email, when you hovered over it, it was a totally different link. Which is a huge, that's phishing, that's the first thing they
Yeah,
teach you.
right.
So, so I told Scott that, I was like, man, I hope that doesn't screw up your election, because I just assumed it was phishing and moved on. But if you do have the email, it makes it real easy to vote. You just click on the link and then you can vote.
I got it in the mail.
Right.
It comes both ways.
It's going to come both ways. My point is, if you did not get any way to vote, I really and truly want you to vote. I do want you to vote for Scott Yonley. If you're not intending to vote for Scott, well, you know, don't worry about it. It's not that important.
Real quick.
Yeah, go ahead.
Also,
Here.
If you think you're an ARRL member, and when they went to the new system and you put in your dues and you clicked bill my card annually, and then let's say several months later your credit card gets stolen and someone tries to buy $2,000 worth of iPhones on it and you change your credit card. One and a half, yeah. The ARRL system will not actually tell you that it failed to renew your membership. Because if you go in there, it thinks you have a valid card on file for auto renewal, but when it does it, it fails, and nothing tells you that it failed. So you will end up like me and call and ask why you didn't get your ballot and find out you haven't been a member for 3 months. So something to think about with the way that works if you use a credit card. So
Wow. That's weird. Normally you get some kind of notification. I can't imagine you not being happy, Jason.
you know.
Yeah. Okay. Anything else on the voting? Wow. Pennsylvania, you know? I mean, Pittsburgh and bad quarterbacks, and look at this. Good thing I'm a fabulous receiver. Okay, the Worcester Half Marathon request for operators. Doug? Oh, Doug. Let's get you on this. Can you catch? Or are you from Pennsylvania too?
Yeah. For the past 4 years, the Wayne County Club has helped with the Worcester Half Marathon, which benefits the United Way, and it's taking place on October the 28th. If people would be interested in helping with that, it's very basic. You're just standing along the route, an extra set of eyes for the first responders that are there. So if you'd like to help with that, let me know prior to this Saturday, because I'll be putting the assignments together at that time. My email and contact information is on the club roster.
Okay. All right, Doug, thank you for that. And I'm sure you'll get some folks ready to rock and roll on that. And I do apologize for the Pennsylvania comments, but of course, everybody knows that Ohio State's playing Penn State this weekend. Well, I mean, I think it's a game. We'll see. No. All right, more announcements. Sarah sponsors VE session December 2nd. That's the next one coming up. It's going to be at the United Methodist Church in Wadsworth. This is our website under the Education tab. Click on there, all the information you need if you're looking for an upgraded license, etc., etc. We got the team to take care of you, right, Stefan? All right, and I'm going to call on you here in just a little bit for your VE report. And lastly, I think this is lastly, annual holiday party is December 7th. We have invited the work group, and it should be a good time. It is going to be here, and we'll be working on that here starting real soon, like next week. Okay, yes?
I looked last week or something, I was looking to see the date on our website, and either I'm blind, I didn't see it, or it's not on the website. I just want to make sure that
Okay, we'll have to put that up there. Well, and it is a little early. My main thrust here is to make sure that we all know it's on December 7th so that you can plan ahead. So my wife has already gotten some tremendous door prizes. And I think we have a volunteer to help us. Yeah, Jennifer? Jennifer McCormick is going to step up, and my wife and her and Jason's wife are going to put together a fabulous party. So hopefully everybody will be around for that. Anyway, December 7th, make sure it's on your calendar. I don't want to hear any excuses. Huh?
Yeah, you said here. You said
I had what?
here. It's here. Here.
Oh, it's here, yeah.
What's the food gonna be like?
It's going to be fabulous. So who asked that question?
Nobody.
Are you gonna have oat milk for the coffee for the guys?
Hey, and we're going to have a lot of garlic. As a matter of fact, we'll have garlic necklaces so that you don't get eaten by a vampire on your way out. It might.
We're doing Subway box lunches.
There you go. All right, anybody else? Any announcements for the good of the cause? Anything? Oh, geez.
Quick announcement.
Wait a minute. Okay, ready? Oh, no, you can't catch it. You're from Ohio.
I can't even catch a cold. So. Real quick, just to let everybody know, my DMR repeater in Richfield is finally back on the air and online. If you want to try out the DMR machine in Richfield, I've been getting very good reports. I've got a person up in Brook Park that's using it with an HT, a person in Twinsburg using it with an HT, a person in Kent using it with an HT, so looks like the coverage is pretty good. 444-5125 for the receive, 449-5125, of course, for the transmit, and it's color code 7. So again, DMR repeater in Richfield is back on the online finally.
All right, thanks for that. Digital Dorsey. Is that Super Digital Dorsey or just Digital Dorsey? All right, here we go. Mike, you're up.
Okay. First things first, has everybody signed in? Has everybody signed?
I did not sign in. Okay, please sign in. That really helps us keep some semblance of, and I didn't sign in, of course, so. Can somebody put me on that list, please? Pretty please. I'd say sugar on it, but no. Yeah, no. Okay, Mike sent the minutes out. He also sent a PDF of the PowerPoint presentation last month and the list of attendees as well. So is there any, well, Mike, I'm sorry, I don't want to steal your thunder. Any corrections, anything that we missed or that Mike missed? I'm not taking responsibility for that. No way. Propaganda is what it is. So what do you think of our new little minutes thing with Mike's picture on it? Isn't that great? I love it.
I would have loved to have been in your class when you were teaching.
Stefan, you would not have been in my class very long. Yeah, you'd have lasted about 5 minutes. All right, here we go. The Frito Bandito, you're up. Oh, he's not here. Are you? Okay, I guess I'm up. So we had a statement balance of $43.3280. Not too awfully bad. There was some miscellaneous field day items that still came through. 50-50 raffle, the field day food, partial payment. We had the ARRL testing, and we all know how that works. The reimbursement, the Barometer Net T-shirts, gross sale, and this is incoming. Now, we still owe them roughly somewhere around $500 or 500 and change, something like that. So we did make a couple dollars on that. We sold 60 T-shirts, which is amazing. And our All-Star hosting fee, which is just stuff that happens, and the $66 from the last month's 50/50 raffle. Any questions on the expenditures? We have repeater replacement maintenance allocation of $1,100, which is going to be pretty much status quo. Just about $4,000 remaining, and the general allocation for the club. And we have about $5,000 in the bank, so we can do a thing or two or three, maybe. So, any questions on? Boy, Jeff looks better and better every month, don't you think?
I did a quick question, Gary.
Yeah.
If we do decide to go ahead with the Bob Bone fox hunt thing, do we want to purchase that equipment from Barbara?
And I'm gonna see. Yeah, we could do that. I don't know anything about it. If you do, then I'll.
I don't know anything yet. I had heard somebody was thinking about distributing his equipment.
No. Well, what happened? I talked to Barbara, and right now she gets great pleasure in going downstairs in his area and reminiscing or whatever.
Would it take a motion for us to offer her a purchase price?
No,
for that equipment?
I don't think so.
All right, we can
That's
do that.
that's
We can do
that's
that at this executive committee.
yes. And what we'll end up doing when she's ready, just like Bob volunteered, and I think you were with us, Eric, no, it was, oh geez, CVS's shack that we went through and helped her out with that. And it's a hard thing to do, but I mean, you're kind of taking people's, I don't know. It's just a hard thing to do, but you certainly, they don't know what to do with ham radio equipment, so we try to sort through and help them say, okay, this is valuable, this is what it's worth. And typically, I know with Delangelo, God help me with this. Ron, thank you. Jeez Louise. Senility is impeachable, by the way. I just want you to know.
You'll never be impeached, Gary.
Wait a minute. I'm sorry. It's not. Okay. Anyway, sorry, Dave. All right. Yeah, Ron. We helped Ron out. Anyway, that's how that worked. Okay. No more questions about the treasurer's report. We're doing really well, and we have. We have a lot of things accomplished so far, and thanks to Jason and others who have put forth the effort. Not to mention we've had the money and the funds to do this, so that's also a good thing. All right. Okay, let's vote. Stefan, which one do you want to take?
Take them both, it doesn't matter. The first one.
Okay, the minutes. Motion to accept the minutes, Stefan. There's a second back there from a furry guy that looks like Sasquatch. All right, that's a second. Anybody? If you do not agree with accepting the minutes, let me know.
And if you don't agree, I'm moving in with my dog.
Really?
4-month-old golden retriever pup.
All right, very good. All right, and the treasurer's report. Stefan, Sasquatch, no, Fred, sorry. WAKOC for the second. And any questions, any disclaimers? Anybody have a problem with that? All right, very good. Thank you very much. Next.
Did you forget to call back on Donna for her wreath?
Nope.
Oh, you're still getting that, okay.
No, it's coming. Okay, so now, right now, brace yourself. Whoa. All right, we're going to have our program now. It's 30, 40 minutes. And then we have, let me clue you in on what's coming up next. We have, we're going to take a break after the presentation. And then we have a couple of things to cover. The Eyeball QSO party and T-shirt delivery at Ray's Place on Saturday, the 21st. That's coming up. And let's see what else is in here. We have just a couple other things to cover after the presentation. So that's where we are. Do you have to leave? Well, the point is, we're going to have that time for. I mean, we can do this now. I don't care. The 50-50's coming. You want to leave too? No, I don't want to do that. All right, Jason, you're up.
I'm out. Here's everything you need.
Okay. Okay. We'll see you.
Because I don't understand the program.
Excuse me, this is a general look at RF spectrum. I gave Gary the title of this presentation before I actually wrote any of the presentation. What we're going to take a look at tonight is talking about RF spectrum largely from a size perspective and the concept of allocating spectrum. And I thought we'd talk about that because Sarah has, there's been a couple of things with the FCC recently. Sarah has commented on them about different uses of spectrum. But I've got different questions over the last couple months, and I thought maybe we would talk just a little bit about essentially what is spectrum, how big is it, or how small is it, and how we use it. So, so we're going to talk about a couple of concepts that all sort of interrelate. And I want to be clear that if you are deeply into electronics or an engineer, I'm going to skip over lots of math and make generalizations about things. So just to set the stage a little bit here. But the first concept we want to talk about is what is bandwidth. So probably many people are familiar with talking about bandwidth in terms of their internet connection or maybe their cell phone connection, right? But in general, that's just a shortcut to talking about how much signal, how wide, what type of signal that you can get down a wire, over the air, you know, whatever you're using. Obviously, for radio purposes, we're talking about signal over the air. And it can mean two things. One is it can be a bunch of mathematical calculations, which, as I said, we are going to skip right over that. And we're really going to talk sort of about, loosely about what I'll call the regulatory definition of occupied bandwidth. And the reason for that is this. When we're talking about in ham radio, obviously there's lots of physics involved in ham radio and, you know, all of those kind of things. But in a lot of cases when we're talking about the use of the amateur bands, we're talking about the allocation that hams have in different spots along the electromagnetic frequency. And there's a couple of things that we need to think about when we're talking about these topics. And these are things that you learned in your license class and probably fairly quickly, unless you're really into this, stopped thinking about, right? So what we're really going to talk about is if we have a broadcast of some type, and we'll talk about that in a minute, how does that work? What are the characteristics of that? Every signal takes up space. And the technical term for this in the ARRL handbook at least is occupied bandwidth. And the ARRL handbook will tell you that it is the range of frequencies within which a specified percentage of the total power occurs. A common percentage used is 99%. This means that the total signal power outside the occupied bandwidth must be less than 20 dB, less than the total signal power. For properly adjusted, low distortion transmitting system, the occupied bandwidth is determined mainly by the modulation type and the filtering. In the case of digital modulation, the symbol rate. And that's just the first paragraph. Enzo does not care about this. Maverick definitely does not care about it. Although he would chew on it Maverick would be chewing on it if he could get a hold of it. So what are we really talking about here? What we're talking about is essentially the size of a transmission, right? And specifically we're talking about the size of a transmission within certain limitations, right? And throughout this presentation, you're going to see a set of purple bars and a set of green bars. Everywhere you see a set of purple bars, that's going to be talking about the occupied bandwidth of a signal. How wide, physically, how wide is this signal? And when we see a green bar, we're going to be talking about a level of power or a level of not power. You'll see what I mean by that in a minute here. So this is an example that comes right out of the ARRL handbook. And this is the FCC's definition of bandwidth lightly summarized, right? The bandwidth is the width of the signal that is above a particular threshold. The FCC will say it's 26 dB. So 26 dB is roughly equivalent to 1/400th or 0.0025% of the signal power. Now this is a generic definition. There's lots of nuances to this, right? But when we're talking about width, we're basically talking about the amount of a signal that occurs inside of these purple lines that falls then within these green lines. And we end up with a rectangular shape, right? Which should look very familiar to people if you're used to looking at like the ARRL bandwidth allocation chart. They're all very nice regular rectangles, right? Because waves are rectangles, right? That's how we just push rectangles out over the air. But realistically, what we're talking about here is an emission. So a lot of times we think about, or at least we talk about, a radio signal as being on a particular frequency. So Sarah's repeater transmits on 147.39, 147.39 megahertz. It's not really just, obviously, on 147.39 megahertz. It has width to it, right? The signal takes up an amount of spectrum, and in the case of FM, the dial happens to say or be centered on 147.39 megahertz. We'll talk about FM signals in a minute. But the bandwidth depends on the type of modulation and the data rate that's being used. And I said this is called emissions, and if you look closely, especially at FCC regulations or manuals for different types of radios, if you dig into the details, you'll find that a lot of the rules and a lot of the data on radios talks about these emission designators. And an emission designator is just a numeric set of codes that builds up to something that we often use shorthand for. So in the ham community, a lot of times we use the term CW for Morse code, which is an archaic term that actually deals with spark gap transmitters, right? But that's what we call Morse code, right? If you look in definitions, an emission, the what we call CW is emission 150H0A1A, or single sideband, right? HF phone. HF phone is actually 2K5J3E. That's a 2.5 kilohertz wide single sideband suppressed carrier analog information received over telephone, or your ears. PSK31, 60H0J2B. A 60 hertz wide single sideband suppressed carrier digital information using modulated subcarrier with an automatic computer reception. These are all, these are the terms that we use, but really what we're talking about is something larger, right? We talk about operating in FM, or we talk about operating FT8 or PSK, but really those are all shorthand for a particular type of emission, and they're all categorized when you dig down into the details. I'm not going to go into this a lot because it doesn't really matter unless you really like to read specifications and rules. But an emissions designator is a 6 to 8 character code identifying electromagnetic modulation characteristics of a wireless device. Different codes represent different features of the wireless emissions from a product. That's the FCC definition of an emissions designator. And I'm not going to go through all of this in detail, but usually you'll see 6 letters, and the first 4 have something to do with its bandwidth. A 400 hertz signal, for example, is 400H. A 12.5 kilohertz signal would be 12K5. 6 megahertz wide would be 6M00, 6 meg, 0 field. I mean, there's a little chart on how that works. The next character, oh, yeah, go ahead.
Just a quick observation there. It looks like they use the letter in place of the decimal point.
Kind of, yeah.
So
Well, so
400H, the decimal point is at the end and it's hertz, so there's 400 hertz dot 00. 2.4, 2K gives you the decimal point, and then 400 gives you the residual. 12K point, or 12K5, 12 gives you the kilohertz, there's the decimal point, and then you get the residual. 6M gives you the decimal point, and 00 gives you the residual.
And the magnitude. MK, you know, MK, M for magnitude.
The letter,
Right.
residual is after the letter, the principal is before the letter.
Right. The 5th character is a modulation type, and there's a table of them. Some of the ones we run into most often in the ham community is F for FM. That one makes sense. J for SSB, because, you know. A for AM, which that makes sense. And then the last one that's used by the FCC is the modulating signal. So none, a digital channel with no carrier, an analog channel with a carrier, things like that. Some of them will have an optional 7th and 8th character of an emissions designator that gives some extra details for different types of digital modes, television signals, things like that. All this makes sense so far? Yeah, Bob.
Does FreeDV have a designator?
FreeDV, the application, or?
The modulation that they developed, or the hams developed their own digital voice modulation.
Is that you're talking about M17?
Yeah, I forget what the name is, but that might be it.
If it's truly unique, it might. I don't know off the top of my head. It would depend on if it doesn't fall into the general characteristics of another modulation type. Like if it's like 4FSK or something like that, and it's just a special type of that, then it probably didn't get its own emission designator. If it's something completely different, then yeah, it would. But you can pack a lot of different protocols inside of a type of emission. Because again, we're talking about the size and the rate, not necessarily what is inside the little rectangle. AM amplitude modulation. This is your AM broadcast radio. We'll take a look at a subset of this in a second for SSB. This is how Morse code works. If we take a look at a 1 kilohertz tone amplitude modulation at 10 megahertz, we'll have a dial frequency here of 10 megahertz. That's where our main character is, or excuse me, carrier. And then at 999 and 10,001, you have the carrier for each of the sidebands. This is how AM as an emission functions, right? When we turn that into the representation that gets used when we're talking about emission width or bandwidth, you'll see a lot of these type of pictures, especially in reference publications and things like that, where you have a center frequency and then some interesting shapes that sort of represent the width and the power level of an emission. So in this case, this is an amateur AM transmission. Its bandwidth size is 6 kilohertz. It's 6 kilohertz wide. It has above this power level that we talked about, in between the purple bars, you have a transmission that's as wide as 9.997 megahertz to 10.003 megahertz. Now, obviously, in here, you can see that there's a gap, and we'll talk about that in a little while, what some of those gaps might mean. But this is an example of when we're talking about occupied bandwidth for an emission, it's this box right here. Does that make sense? So single sideband, is the suppressed, you suppress the carrier, you suppress one side of the AM transmission, and then you suppress the carrier of the side you want. So in this case, this is a lower sideband signal. Your frequency, your dial display, would still be on 10 megahertz. But since this is a lower SSB sideband, if you'll note, we just have that 1/2 of the AM emission that was on the last screen. So when we draw those purple and green boxes here, this now becomes the bandwidth or the size of the transmission that we're concerned about. And its size is only 2.5 kilohertz wide, right? Now, 2.5 kilohertz wide, why? Well, again, not to scale, but you have this gap then between the dial frequency and what your emission really takes up. Now, practically speaking, an SSB is usually about 2.8 kilohertz wide or so. I was just going by what the handbook had as the examples. But for example, this is where you come up with interesting things such as a band edge, right? If you are on the lower end of an allocation with an upper sideband, or I'm sorry, if you're on the upper end of an allocation with an upper sideband signal, and you say, hey, I'm right on, 10 megahertz isn't in the ham bands, but let's just for argument's sake, 10 megahertz is the top end of an allocation, and you key up, you're actually transmitting your whole signal that's outside of the allocation to amateur radio. Because you're actually only transmitting, as a matter of fact, outside the edge of the band. So, for example, if you want this to stay inside the bandwidth, your dial frequency would actually have to be 9997 to pull that whole bandwidth inside the edge of the band. So amplitude modulated on-off keying, or what we call CW, right? Exactly the same kind of thing. Now this graph, or this chart, is actually on its side. So to match up all the other ones, you kind of got to go like that. But again, we have these purple bars that represent the width of a Morse code transmission. So you're actually, you have, essentially you have key up, key down, key up, key down. And again, you're not just creating a little singular spike, you're actually emitting power across a section of the frequency. You can see here, key or output, your transmitter goes live, you let it go, the transmission tapers off, you make the next one, etc. So like I said, you got to turn this one on its side, but that's what the bandwidth looks like. Make sense?
Question?
Yeah.
If you, I just want to make sure I'm clear on this. So if you set your CW tone at 800 hertz, it'll be this wide. If you set your CW tone at 600 hertz, it's going to be a little bit narrow.
That's for your listening.
Pardon?
That's your listening.
What about your transmission?
Your transmission is always the emission size. So if you go back to this, your CW emission is always 150 hertz wide. 150 hertz wide, double sideband, digital, no carrier, oral reception.
On your transceiver or only on your receive, not in your transmitter.
Correct. That is for your listening comfort. And again, so that's actually a great question, though, because that shows you the difference between what we experience and what's really going on in the background, right? A 800 kilohertz or 800 hertz wide CW transmission would be a very fat, transmission. I could not find my remote. I don't know what I did with it. So does the CW case make sense? All right, so repeaters, FM modulation. I used a different graph here on purpose just to shake things up a little bit. Frequency modulation. This is a type of angular modulation. It's also exactly the same fundamentals as phase modulation. Now, FM has several definitions of how wide it is depending on what you want to talk about. One of them is what's called Carson's rule, which is the 98% of the spectral energy, so 98% of the power, is in a width of 2 times the size of the frequency bandwidth plus, wow, my mind just went completely blank. The size of the frequency plus the frequency, the middle of the frequency. It's been a long day, I'll just blame that. So in this case, we have a displayed dial frequency of 147.48, and that's just because that's what the book example had in it. The Carson rule will say that 98% of your emission is in this 5.6 kilohertz size transmission. Now, this is where the FCC will say, well, an FM transmission is actually 18.1 kilohertz wide. And it falls in between these green bands. So while your FM transmission may look like this, the part that the FCC cares about is in this box. Because that's where, once you get not too far away from a transmission source, all of this power is essentially noise or non-existent. So when you key up and you're making an FM transmission, the power that matters is somewhere between 15 and 18 kilohertz wide. So again, it's not just the frequency 147.48, but it's got some spacing to it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and that's where your audio is, right? Between those two limits.
What do you mean that's where your audio is?
As the audio gets superimposed onto your FM carrier.
Well, that's your deviation width.
Yeah.
So, yes and no. Yes, in the fact that yes, you want the deviation to appear inside of the
Deviation
Right. Well, it's combined with the carrier, the modulation, the carrier modulation, yeah. All right, so thought exercise, 40-meter band. The 40-meter band, now remember, and this is interesting, right? So think about the scales we're talking about here. A single FM transmission, according to the FCC, is 18 kilohertz wide. The entire 40-meter general band is only 175 kilohertz wide. So let's say that all use, well, actually, let's do this first. So since all emissions have width, one of the questions we have to ask ourselves is how many emissions of a specific type or set of types can fit inside of a given bandwidth, right? So in 40 meters, let's assume everything in the general band, so 7175 to 7300. Let's say everything's a perfectly sized 3 kilohertz SSB signal, and that everything else is exactly the same. Everybody's transmitting from the same space with the same power, the same atmospheric conditions, right? Everything else is equal. This is interesting, right? You could only have 57 simultaneous, non-overlapping single sideband transmissions, right? Each one, 3 kilohertz wide, times 57 is just shy of 175 kilohertz, right? Now, obviously, there's lots of other conditions, right? Which is why instead of 57 simultaneous transmissions at 40 meters, there's hundreds, right? Or even thousands, depending on the given day. Another question, are certain emissions too problematic for a given bandwidth? One of the arguments with digital modes is you can increase the more bandwidth, or the wider the emission, or multiple emissions, the faster you can send data. But when you're talking about, so down here, right, is the data portion, right? That one's only 125 kilohertz wide, right? Do you want to turn over, you could make a 125 kilohertz wide signal to shove a bunch of data, but then you wipe out the entire shared space, right? How much spacing is needed between allocations to prevent interference, right? We'll talk about that in a minute here. And how can distance and power help, right? One of the things in the 60-meter proceeding in front of the FCC right now is, should the use of 60 meters be capped at 15 watts or be capped at 100 watts, right? Well, what's the full legal limit of amateur radio? 1500. You can't do 1500 in certain bands. One of them is 60 meters, right? One of the discussions in the proceedings is that too interfering? Because remember, with more power, theoretically, your signal goes farther. And what we're talking about is in 60 meters, we're specifically talking about right now 5 discrete 3 kilohertz wide channels. The more power, the less you can share that bandwidth with other users. So those are considerations that come into play. Same thing with distance, right? If you have only a 100-watt signal, you have to have some really, really good conditions to talk to someone in India, right? From here, literally all the way on the other side of the globe. Most times, transmissions don't go that far. So that's interesting, right? You can fit 57 simultaneous transmissions inside of an allocation. So I mentioned spacing, right? How do you avoid interference? So this is something interesting. 2-meter repeaters. Remember what we said the emissions width was according to the FCC for an FM transmission? 18 kilohertz, 18.1 kilohertz. The channel steps for repeaters is 12.5 kilohertz, right? That's kind of a problem because that's bigger than this here, right? This is where we get into that conversation of power and distance, right? If you have a coordinated repeater with OARC in Ohio, for example, they've done the work to say, okay, Sarah's repeater at 147.39, transmitting at 100 watts, can go on reasonable conditions so far. Therefore, we're not going to put another 147.39, nor are we going to put a repeater that's inside that emissions width, so 375 and 39's at the top, so you couldn't have one higher, but you wouldn't put one lower nearby because they'd wipe each other out, right? And the same thing happens in reverse. All these are in pairs. So Sarah's repeater receives on 147.99, transmits on 147.39. 12.5 kilohertz down, there's a receiver on 147.975 that transmits on 147.375, and so on. They all move in pairs. So if you've ever heard on a really good propagation day, when the carrier drops on 3.9, every once in a while you'll hear someone still talking. Well, on really good propagation days, we are getting overlap from a repeater 147.39 located in Burgettstown, Pennsylvania. You could also have interference. I don't know of one around here, but if there was a 147.375 nearby, right, on really good propagation days, you could wipe that out. So this is why there's lots of talk in the repeater space of people that hold on to repeater pairs and never put a repeater on the air, because if you look at the breakdown in the band plan where you can put repeaters, if you use, originally they were 25 kilohertz wide. So you could have 11, 13, and 14. You could have 38 repeaters. When they changed it to 12.5 kilohertz spacing, you double that, 22, 27, 28, right? But then think about the coverage of this. How many repeaters are in the state of Ohio? How many repeaters are in the Ohio, Pennsylvania, West Virginia tri-state area, right? There's repeaters in Canada that if you have a really high antenna, you can actually hear on a good day. All of these things go into planning who can use what frequencies, at what size, at what power. All of those things go into this, right? Any questions on this? So there's two other considerations for a transmission that deal with what you're transmitting and what space it's taking up. Harmonics are naturally occurring. These are unwanted higher frequency component that is a multiple of the fundamental frequency, and they can create distortions in the fundamental frequency. We'll talk about that in a second. Spurs is the other topic. This is a definition of a type of RF interference. So this is a spur is when your transmitter does not have sufficient suppression of out-of-band emissions. Harmonics and parasitics are mostly what we're talking about here. This gets into play when you hear people complaining about certain types of radios, right? Especially in the handheld space, right? Do these radios transmit appropriately such that you're not interfering with other users of your limited shared spectrum? We're not going to go deep into harmonics, but a harmonic is a signal, like I said, with some integer multiple. The harmonic at twice the fundamental frequency is the second, the one at the third is the third. Shockingly enough, it counts up numerically. Like we don't have like the Jth harmonic randomly at number 4, like you have for a single sideband, right? But if you have a complex waveform, again, let's say it's 10, 20, and 30 kilohertz. 10 kilohertz is the fundamental frequency, and then 20 and 30 are the second and third harmonics. So where does this get interesting? Well, let's take a look back at 40 meters, right? The fundamental frequency of, and again, these are in round numbers, right? Because these are wider. The second harmonic of 7.178 megahertz is 14.356. Well, that's just out of the 20 meter band. What if it was down further, right? Now that harmonic could be right in the middle of the top end of 20 meters. Where's the third harmonic? And where's the fourth harmonic? Right. This is interesting. What's the third harmonic of 147.99 where we receive? Right in the middle of the UHF bands, 443.97. Right? So this is why harmonics get important. This is my first of my AI-created pictures that are in this presentation. I've been playing around quite a bit with something with what's called DALL-E. So I said, create a digital art picture of a parasitic oscillation. And we got that, which is actually a pretty cool picture. I'm not sure how it's parasitically oscillating, but it's a pretty cool picture. What? Kind of, yeah. But it's not oscillating.
Well, each iteration is a similar iteration of every other iteration.
Yeah. So a parasitic oscillation, right? This is where you get into your amplifier circuits. These all have parasitic reactances. We're not going to dive into this at all. This is a whole chapter in electronics theory itself. We're going to accept they exist. You can go read about them in section 17.8 of the handbook, and we're going to press onward. So interference.
Question, is this one of the things that was one of the issues of the original Bofang radio?
Yes, we're going to talk about that in just a second. No, I'm sorry, not parasites. Well, actually both. Yeah, both actually. Actually, all of them, right? So a couple things, right? We have to, when we're talking about spectrum, there's a couple different concepts, right? The first is this concept of necessary bandwidth. This is the size of the emission that we care about, right? We want it to fall inside these purple bars. And we want it to fall above this green line, right? Below this green line is okay, above this green line is not okay. Whether that's technical or administrative, it doesn't matter. The concept is that there's a bar above which bad, below which good, right? So you have an out-of-band emission. This is when your original signal is wider than what the allowed bandwidth is. So in this case, this is a signal where this part of the emission is actually outside, it's wider than what's permitted under whatever. This is just an example. I don't even know what this is, right? But if your permitted emission is as wide as that purple bar, then this is your out-of-band emission from here to here because it's above that green line of whatever that threshold was set. And then you have spurs, right? So spurs can be parasitics, which are just kind of out here somewhere, right? Those could be all over the place depending on a whole bunch of factors. Then you can have your harmonics. So let's say this is a second harmonic or a third harmonic of a transmission. Well, if you don't have good suppression, now your transmission not only is wider than the allowed bandwidth, you're also at least one or two harmonics higher, making that same transmission. We're going to talk about this in a second.
Good question.
Yeah.
Are parasitics normally higher or lower than your intended frequency?
It depends.
Okay.
There are so many factors, right? It could be higher if you have something broken. It could be lower if you have a bad component that's not necessarily wrong, but just, yeah. Right, your harmonics.
I was picturing the intended transmission in between those two, the parasitics and the spurious.
Yeah, this isn't to any sort of scale, either X or Y, right? It's just a picture of where the things are.
Transmission could be in between those two, or it could be below the parasitics. That's not part of the.
Well, harmonics are always going to be higher.
Yes, but the
Parasitics could be anywhere, yeah.
All right, thank you.
So suppression. This is the suppression of spurious emissions by a ninja in a cartoon format, because suppression of spurious emissions was like a blob. I don't know, it didn't suppress anything. So suppression. So this is the rules on, going back to this previous slide, the suppression is this green line, right? The FCC sets this green line by rule, right? What aren't you allowed to transmit out of your emission? So Part 97 and other sections of the FCC have them. If you've ever seen the sticker on the back of a whole bunch of consumer stuff that says this applies to FCC Part 15 regulations because it can accept and not create harmful interference, that's what all the lines are for. These are requirements of the transmitter as a system. They can be internal to the transmitter or some sort of post-transmitter, pre-antenna filtering. They're looking at the transmission as a system before it's radiated, before it emits. And as we mentioned, out-of-band and spurs can be a really big problem with cheap or broken or poorly regulated transmission. Doug Hunter actually sent this to me, which was partially the inspiration for this talk. There's a guy on Ham Radio Crash Course, which is a web show on YouTube. He bought a radio I'd never heard of called a Talk Pod. That's supposedly for amateur frequencies. And he did a fascinating, literally he just walked around his neighborhood, because what he found was when he was transmitting on 146.58 in the simplex band, there was a spur that was almost as powerful as 240, or a harmonic that was almost as powerful as 146.58. If you go watch this video, he's got an SDR listening on 293 as he walks around his neighborhood transmitting, and there's a huge, huge signal because the transmitter is just such low quality. So that causes a couple problems, right? Number one, in the good neighbor space, you're a noisy transmitter, right? The other thing is, all of these spurs and parasites take power. Power here is power that's not going into your actual transmission, right? A lot of the early Baofangs, the UV5Rs, the joke was, oh yeah, it'll transmit on the frequency and the 6 frequencies on either side of it as well. If you put it on a spectrum analyzer, you'd see just this massive signal, right? Well, it's rude, and you're losing the power on what you care about, right? So that's why Baofangs usually Baofangs and all those kind of radios have got frowned upon. Now they're a lot better now. And again, like we've talked about in this club, the radio that you have is better than the radio that you don't have, right? If Baofeng is what you can afford, then good, right? But when you hear people talking about why these radios are problematic, this is why. Yeah.
I had a joke for those, and it's like some of them were listed as 10-watt radios,
Yeah.
and it was like, oh, this frequency gets 1 watt, you get 1 watt.
Yeah, it's the Oprah mode of power. Yeah, you all get a watt. This was an extreme example. So this was from the Shortwave Modernization Coalition. One of the submissions had this graph in it, and I should have put the citation on here and I forgot. This is that huge day trading signal that they were talking about. They actually captured this on a pan adapter. Here's the upper end of the ham band, right? Down here, way past minus 50 dB, is where the suppression of this signal should have been by regulation, right? So from the top of the ham band all the way down into 14.313, this station was interfering with, what would that be? 50, just shy of 50 kilohertz of the ham band, right? So that's why when we talk about in the filings things like guard bands, right? How far away does the middle of this signal, how far away from this signal should it actually be from the top end of another allocation? How much suppression, right? How much suppression needs to be in that signal? If you remember that graph we had with the purple lines where there's the out-of-band emissions, right? How wide should that transmission be allowed to be? These are some of the things that get talked about. Yeah.
At this point, I'd like to thank Jason for writing up our response to the FCC, because I think this is the point where what he's talking about really comes into play with what our problems could be with that allocation proposal. And I read Jason's proposal. I thought it was extremely well written, and I want to thank him for submitting that on behalf of the club.
Thanks, Dave. So, why does this matter, right? Well, knowledge is good. Emil Faber said so. But seriously, right? Amateurs need to understand the consequences of their emissions, right? When you're choosing modes, when you're choosing equipment, right? When you're maintaining your equipment, when you're building something. All of these things come into play that is something you need to think about. And the other thing is amateurs need to understand what does and doesn't matter, especially if you're going to make comments on spectrum allocation. If you read some of the filings that people make about some of these proceedings, some of the wildest, most craziest things get thrown in there. This is going to be the end of ham radio. It's going to wipe out everything in the whole world. Like, no, right? But when we can talk about it with each other and with other stakeholders from a position of being informed and understanding some of the base concepts, then you can start to make headway. Hey, you know, if you make it this wide without this amount of suppression, it could have this effect on something. So instead of ham radio is going to end, well, okay, this could be accommodated if you take the following into account. And then it becomes one of my favorite quotes at work, not my problem. So that was all I had. Any questions? This was a swirling vortex of questions.
Thank you. Thank you.
Anything else I can answer for anybody?
Nice job.
All right, thanks.
All right, nice, really nicely done. I like the graphics. That was AI as well.
Yep.
And so is that, by the way, just in case. All right, fabulous presentation. That was very informative and to the point. And again, as Dave mentioned, it was paralleled the submission that you made to the FCC on behalf of Sarah, and that was quite nice. We can take 5 minutes if you want, or we can move on. Anybody need 5 minutes? Pressing on. All right, couple things more to cover before we pull the plug. Barometer Net T-shirt contest. I got to tell you, this was so well received. There has been comments about doing this, I don't know, every other year or something along those lines, get a new design for a T-shirt. The one in question here, the one that won, really kind of commemorates, where is he? Oh, there he is, Dick, K8AMX and WB8VMW. Let's see. If you're a goat, stand up. Oh, you don't have to stand up. That's all right.
Let's
What does a goat say? Wait a minute. No. I know what it says. Wait a minute. What is that? Not Aflac. It says. That's the duck. The duck says Aflac. Ah, there you go. And that is kind of resonated for a couple years on the Barometer Net, and it was absolutely, well, it's now immortalized on a T-shirt. Mark, KG4SCK, where is he? He's in Kentucky. Anyway, he was the winner, and all I want to say here, quite honestly, lunch and shirt delivery is going to be at Ray's Place. That is directly across the street from Summit Mall and BJ's. Where BJ's is on that corner of 18 and Jet Road, it's right there. You can park. There's a driveway that goes in front of the building here. You can park in the front, or you can park in the back. Anyway, and someone mentioned Egg Castle. Who mentioned Egg? Ah, there we go. That's right. It's it's there. It's on the back far side. This is on the front near side, closest to Jet Road. Anyway, easy to find, and we're going to have a ball, and I hope everyone can make it. You do not have to be a Sarah member. And as a matter of fact, we had a lot of participation outside the Sarah Club and basically the Barometer Net. Let's see. Looks like Nick at Night.
Well, yes. The game starts at noon, and parking there really stinks, so we're taking note.
That's why I said 11:30. Arrival time 11:30 to noon, but again, you can park on the back side, and then the parking lot does kind of, it's narrow. There's only one lane of traffic or parking here, and then it kind of goes out like that. It's, there's Ohio State, Penn State's going to be there. So if you're a college football aficionado, Buckeye fan, Penn State fan. Oh, does that mean I'm number one? Anyway, if you're, the games will be on, but we are going to have a ball. It's going to be a good time, and I really hope everybody can come. Even if you didn't get a T-shirt. I do have extra. We did order extra, so we'll have some on hand if you. $9,000 payable in advance. I think it was like $14 for through XL, I believe, and then the higher were 17 for 2XL and up. Okay, that's that. Oh yeah, this is an aerial. This is Market Street. This is where Ray's is. This is BJ's right there. So it's really pretty simple to get to. Your GPS will take you there, trust me. Okay, Tech Committee report. I'm not even going to call on Jason because I'm sure he's out of breath from talking so much already. Oh my God, who's that? Gremlins! And now we know. I got this picture. Yeah, there it is, right there.
I'm going to take away your Photoshop.
The club pays for it.
Wow. That gremlin looks just like you. Okay, anyway, we got 147.39 all hooked up and newly cabled, and now the TKR 850. We got new cabling for that as well, and it is all hooked up. The little gremlin right there went out there and did it, and we appreciate all his efforts.
And Nick said it's way better now. It's way better now. There you go. Thank you.
And the report is that it's way better now.
Thank you, Gary.
You're welcome. You're welcome. And again, I want to thank Pam Fyrus and Scott, our right there on the ball, Scott, for making the TKR 850 donation possible. And that really helped us out. That really helped us out. So if we can just keep the gremlins out of the wiring, I don't know. All right. This is around the room. If you would like to talk to us, here's the microphone. I'm sorry? Well, I'm going to.
Hi. My name is Donna Stein. I'm the coordinator. I'm a net HAMA operator, but I'm also the location coordinator for Wreaths Across America at the Ohio Western Reserve National Cemetery. I don't know how many of you know about Wreaths Across America. We get sponsorships throughout the year from groups and individuals who sponsor wreaths to be placed at the cemetery over the Christmas holidays. And they're veterans wreaths, and we place them on the third Saturday of December. So that's the wreath day this year is December 16th. It's a huge event. We have 1,000, 2,000 people show up to lay wreaths, groups and families and clubs and all sorts of things, all sorts of people, businesses, that sort of thing. And we have these big 18-wheelers come in. Last year we had 14,000 wreaths. We hope I have no idea how many we'll have this year. Most people sponsor wreaths during the month of November. So it's always a big surprise at the end of the month as to how many we actually end up getting. We can get up to, if we get 25,000, we'll have the whole place covered. What I'd like to do and why I'm here today is I think we have communications issues. Some of the people on my team think that chat groups between, teams will suffice, but being more ham operated, thinking that way, I'm thinking we want to do a net for at least some of the people and have some communicators. We have off-site parking because there's not enough parking at the cemetery for a couple thousand people. Much even 1,000 would be way too many. So we have to have off-site parking. And I would like a communicator and those off-site parking locations, communicating with someone who's doing the shuttles, where the shuttles drop off, so that I know where people are and how many people are there and whether there are any issues. I've not had that communication over the last couple of years, so I've gotten some rude surprises when I've called these places and say, hey, can we park there again this year? And they tell me about things like people parking on the grass and things like that, and they don't want that happening, and they want people parking. So I'd like to get ahead of the game, get some communicators. If you are interested to come out and help us with communications, please let me know. My husband, Steve Stein, he's part of the comms unit in Medina County and part of M2M in Medina. He will be doing a net if we get enough communicators. So if you are interested in sponsoring wreaths, you can come see me. If you might be interested in helping us out with this event, it's December 16th again. It's a Saturday. Come see me, and I can either put you on the list to receive updates regularly, or I can pass some information. You guys meet again in November, right? Mm-hmm. Okay, so I could pass some more information. Anyone who's interested in helping out, let me know. Okay? That's it.
Okay. Do you have some contact information that we can have?
Yep. I
You can
do
either
that.
email me or...
I will be happy to email you.
Okay.
I'll put it on the barometer net if you want.
Okay, thank you. I will do that.
Okay, and I have something for you too before you
Okay.
leave.
Our next meeting is on November 16th.
Okay.
Yep.
Great.
See if we can get an email.
Yeah, well, that's what, yeah, we'll definitely,
I will pass my information to Barometer Net, whatever, and put some of this information out there, so it should be online. Yes?
Do you have a website set up for this, for volunteering or information?
Yes, I can pass the information so you can just sign up online. That would work. I would kind of like, we have somebody who's gonna be in charge of volunteers, but I'd kind of like you to be as a group, separate. Like if you go in as an individual on the What Reese page, it kind of just says, I'm gonna be, tell you who they are. So I prefer to hear from the group directly, how many people, communicators, and that sort of thing.
Well, communicate with me, and I'll make sure the group knows, and if there's any questions, then I will facilitate.
Great, thank you.
Okay? You're very welcome.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes?
Question?
Did you? Oh, okay.
Okay, anybody else for the good of the cause? For the bad of the cause? I knew there were insurgents out there someplace. All right, let's see, what's next? Oh, I do want to tell you this, though. So this guy here, I put in waves, harmonics, spurs, and more. I put his title in, and I got some really cool things. Whatever that is, that's what AI thinks harmonics, waves, spurs, and more are. Anyway, that being said. 50-50 raffle. Again, the next club meeting will be November 16th, right here. Plan to attend. Bring a friend. I will tell you this, I do not have a program for next month. If you're working on a project, I heard some banter about some things going on out there in the world. If you're working on a project and would like to clue us in on it, let me know. Let me know. I'm going to be beating a drum for a presentation for November. Again, as I said before, the holiday party's coming up. It's going to be here. It's going to be a good time, and I certainly want everyone who can make it to make it. 50-50 raffles coming up, and I need a motion for adjournment. Nick. Sasquatch. Well, come.
That's gonna stick now.
Oh, it's already stuck. Okay, anybody want to stay here longer? All right, thank you all for coming. It's a great time. I hope we've made this a little more efficient, a little more interesting perhaps, and we look forward to seeing you all on Saturday, and we also look forward to seeing you next month on the 16th. With that, that's all I have. 50-50 raffle.
This is how they always win. They're the last ones in and they go on the top.
It don't matter, I mix them up.
I know, that's how they always win. There's no way he's winning again.
Way.
Won a couple
Way.
You got a t-shirt, you don't get money this month. Sorry, you're already idolized. I'm kidding.
You can't wait 30 more seconds? I mean, seriously, Marty.
I'm waiting. For what?
No, just go ahead and leave.
You know what? I didn't even get on that one t-shirt. Like the one with the call signs. I didn't even, my calls didn't even.
Hey, did you meet me? Oh, good.
I sure did.
Did we pick yet?
No, because I had more people.
He had more sales.
Oh.
This would have been done if we did it when we usually do.
I'm sure it's my fault, Russ.
Now I lost count.
Start with 1. Math. High school.
Second.
I did.
You want help counting something?
I lost count. That's 130.
That's 130.
This is 130.
Oh, total. Okay.
No, count it again, cause I don't, I get distracted and I forget.
That's 130 right here.
Half of
130 plus that. Right? That's 130 plus your 17.
what's half of 130?
It's, I got it here. I'll just do a count. Oh, yeah. 65.
That's half of 130?
Yep. It's 8 and 8, which is 16. You have 17 there. So one will get 9, one will get 8. Huh?
Plus 9 is 74.
Right.
Plus 8
Correct.
is 73.
Yep.
This part goes to the club. This part goes to the winner. This is why it doesn't matter if you get in last or not. Because I roll them over pretty good.
Good.
All right, you ready? Ready. 001.
I got it.
405.
405. That's
405.
you got it?
First time ever.
I have
405.
Yay! All right, thank you, everybody. Have a fabulous